The great 19th century naturalist Alexander von Humboldt once said, "There is no worldview so dangerous as the worldview of those who have not viewed the world." And I believe that travel is a moral imperative for those of us who can afford it, that we owe it to the world to be engaged. Everyone needs, at some point, exposure to the larger world. And I believe that if everyone spent 2 weeks in a foreign country before the age of 30, no matter where they went and no matter what they did there, that half of the world's diplomatic problems would be solved. And I think if the government understood this social function of travel, there would be government programs to support travel in the way that we have programs to support health and education. Travel is both a window and a mirror. It's a window because it lets you see another society and culture that you're visiting. But it's a mirror because when you go abroad, you're stripped back to your essential self, and you see what that essential self is with a clarity you could never otherwise achieve. Now, we all need to have our compatriots. If we don't have a place we call our own, figuring out who we are is nearly impossible. But without unlike people, you become a caricature of yourself. Neither model needs to win. Neither of them subverts the other. I am a dual national of the United States and the United Kingdom, and in the last year, I voted against Brexit and against Trump, and I lost both times. The results of those voting sessions, like the appointment of nationalist governments in Poland and Hungary and Turkey and Russia, represents a rejection of human diversity and of the open borders that have characterized the world order. In the October Conservative Party conference, Theresa May said, "There is no such thing as a citizen of the world. If you believe you are a citizen of the world, you are a citizen of nowhere. You don't understand what the very word citizenship means." Theresa May is wrong. Patriotism is not nationalism. And you can love your own country and love other countries too. It's not a binary. And if the identity politics of the last 20 years has given us nothing else, it has given us the vocabulary of intersectionality, the understanding that we all have multiple identities all the time, and that you can be old and conservative and British and gay, or young and deaf and radical and French, or Anglo-American and European and a world citizen. It's a hallmark of sophistication to tolerate and celebrate coinciding identities. And the absence of that ability is a mark of alienation and objection. But we err in presuming that because we share the same problems, we all require the same solutions. When I was working in Cambodia, I met a woman named Phali Nguyen, who had lived through unbelievable horrors during the genocide there. She had been forced to watch, while her daughter was raped and then murdered in front of her. The baby she had died because she was too malnourished to produce breast milk. And at the end of the war, she found herself in a camp on the Thai border. And she noticed in that camp that there were a lot of women in particular who had somehow survived the horrific indignities and atrocities, but who were now just sitting in front of their tents in the camp, staring into space, not taking care of their children, not doing anything. And she went to the people who ran the camps, and they said, "We've got our hands full with infectious diseases." They said, "We can't do anything about this." So she decided she would have to do something. And she came up with what she referred to when talking to me as her 3-point program. She said, first, I would go to these women and I would teach them to forget. Not that they would ever really forget the horrible things that had happened to them, but I would give them other things to think about and fill their mind a bit with something else. And that was the beginning of a kind of forgetting. And after I taught them to forget, I would teach them to work. Some of them could do no more than clean houses. Some showed a skill at handicrafts. Some could do other more advanced things. But all of them needed something that they knew was their thing that they could do. She said, and once I had taught them to forget and to work, I would teach them to perform manicures and pedicures. And I said, I beg your pardon? And she said what people had lost most in that Khmer Rouge period was the ability to trust one another. These women had gone so many years without any opportunity to feel beautiful. And I would invite them into my hut and fill it with steam. And within minutes, they were holding out their hands and feet to strangers bearing sharp implements. And after a few minutes of that, they began to tell one another their stories. She said, and then I tried to teach them that these were not three separate skills, but part of a single way of being. And when they understood that, why, they were ready to go into the world again. Now, democratic government must be rooted in the view forward, and that entails forgetting. But we must also strive to work and to trust. And at the moment, we forget too well, and we work and trust too badly. During the campaign, Donald Trump said, I've got no time to travel. America needs my attention now. Can you see America if you don't sometimes gaze at it from abroad? There is a feeling in all of these nationalist movements that difference is threatening rather than beautiful, and part of their shared function is to disavow our humanity, which is why it's not surprising that in the months following the Brexit vote, London's Metropolitan Police Commissioner spoke of a horrible spike in hate crimes, while the Southern Poverty Law Center in the US recorded more than 1,000 hate-fueled incidents in the 3 weeks following the election. When we don't know one another, it's much easier for us to kill one another. When I was about 6, I was in the car with my father. We were driving in the country, and he started to tell me a story which included an allusion to the Holocaust. And he thought I knew about it, and I didn't. And I asked him to explain it, and he explained it, and it didn't make sense to me, and I asked him to explain it again, and he explained it again. And when I asked him the third time, he said, it was pure evil. And he said it in a tone of voice that was meant to end the conversation. But I had one more question. I said, but why didn't those Jews just leave when everything got so bad? And my father said, they had no place to go. And I remember thinking, even then, even when I was 6 years old, that I was never going to be one of those people, that I would always have some place to go, that I would have people ready to welcome me with open arms on every inhabited continent. And it became a defining part of my life. We're in a moment of isolationism when people have forgotten that the nexus of safety is having many places to go. I was in Moscow about a year ago when Putin had brought through some of his autocratic measures. And I was with Andrei Reuter, someone I've known for many, many years, who was involved in the resistance to the putsch when the Soviet Union ended and who had fought idealistically for freedom and justice. And I said to him, do you regret it? Do you now regret that you gave so much energy to those hopes that have not been realized? And he looked at me and said, do I regret it? No, I don't regret it. It's been the engine of everything I've done or thought since then. He said that moment of idealism was like a happy childhood. It was a thing on which you can build to deal with everything that comes along afterwards. And I realized in that moment that a crushed hope is suffused with nobility that mere hopelessness can never know, and that the moment when things shift can be valuable in the present tense, no matter where the shift itself leads, and that change occurs only after hope's multiple inceptions. In February of 2002, just after the invasion, I went to Afghanistan. And I went in good part because I thought it could not be a country composed entirely of warlike peasants and corrupt bureaucrats, which was the image it had in much of the Western press at the time. And I had someone there who was my translator and fixer, and who remains a great friend. Farouk, I had said to him that I wanted to get one of those fur hats, like the ones Karzai wore. And Farouk said, oh, if you want that, we have to go to that street of the hat makers and commission one. So we went and ordered a hat, and the next day we went back to pick it up. And Farouk said, you know, our next appointment is just 5 minutes from here. He said, we can just walk right through that market. And I said, okay. And at the time, most of the people from the West who were in Afghanistan were either UN or military, and they weren't allowed to walk through things like crowded markets. And so we were walking along, and Farouk said to me, put on your hat. And I said, Farouk, foreigners going native look ridiculous. I'm not going to put on my hat. And he said, oh, come on. And I said, really, Farouk, I'd rather not. And he said, please put on your hat. And I said, okay, I'll put on my hat. So I put on my hat, and suddenly everyone around us burst into applause. And one old man stepped forward, and he embraced me. And he said, you are a foreigner, but you have come to our country. You are here in the market with us. You are wearing a real Afghan hat in the real Afghan way. And we want you to know that you are welcome here. About a week later, I was interviewing 3 women activists, and they came to meet me, and they arrived wearing burqas, and they took off their burqas immediately so that we could sit and talk. But I said to them, it's no longer Taliban rule. You no longer have to wear those things. Why are you still wearing them? And the first woman said, well, if I go out without a burqa and I get raped, everyone will say that it was my own fault. And the second one said, well, if I go out without a burqa and the Taliban comes back to power, they might punish anyone they know has been out without a burqa. But the third one said to me, I swore when the Taliban fell that I would burn this garment and never see its like again. But after 5 years, you grow accustomed to being invisible. And the prospect of being visible again is very stressful. And I understood that for this woman, her invisibility gave her a kind of freedom. But I also recognized that that freedom is itself a prison, and recognized that it's often the people who are the least free who understand freedom most deeply. As Toni Morrison said, after you are set free, you must claim a freed self. Now, in a free society, you have a chance to achieve your ambitions, and in an unfree one, you lack that choice, which often makes for more visionary ambitions. People who are constrained often use their words most powerfully, but the word freedom is a verb. You have to relive and achieve it again each day. It does not sit static. It is not an estate to be presumed continuous. And it takes so much time and so much commitment to build freedom, and yet hard-won freedoms can be obliterated with alarming rapidity. Nazism, apartheid, Hutu power, Greater Serbia, each of those arrived and swept away the justice that had preceded it. When I was in China, I spent time with Zhang Peili, an artist who was among the students in revolt in Tiananmen Square in 1989. He was there, he fled the scene, he made a painting of what he had seen and hung it from a bridge in Hangzhou, then had to go into hiding because he was a wanted man. He said to me, you know, probably it was the right thing what happened, because if it hadn't, there would have been a revolution, and hundreds of thousands of people might have died. And I said, but Peili, how can you possibly say that? You almost gave your life for this. You went into hiding for this. You believed so strongly in that student protest. And he said, I'm an artist, and idealism is my right as an artist. But idealism in the hands of a leader is a terrible thing. My husband and I, our family, recently took in a Libyan refugee named Hassan, and we did so in part because the lives we live as gay Americans are such an abstract privilege to gay people from his part of the world and to so many gay people around the world, and partly out of the sense that we all have a moral obligation to help in this time of refugees, and partly because we wanted to send a message to our children, to our friends, and even to ourselves, that this much maligned other can be someone who is not only familiar, but also loved. It's political for us to have Hassan as a member of our household, even though he's coaching our son in football and working in a hospital and bakes fantastic cakes and makes us all laugh. I had hoped that time would divest his presence of its politics, but that eventuality slipped away from us on the US election night. The Italian political theorist Antonio Gramsci once said that revolution requires pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. And I think all social change requires pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. At the time that apartheid was winding down, I went to report in South Africa. I felt I was coming from the society in which democracy functioned to one where that was only a distant hope on the horizon. But these things can turn around. And just after the election in November, the South African artist William Kentridge, with whom I'd spent a lot of time, came to New York. And we talked about what had happened. And he said, what is most shocking is not how shocked you are now, but how unshocked you will be in 6 months' time. And I took that as an invitation to stay shocked. Thank you. Staying shocked is a long game. It requires that we resist the ways that repetition desensitizes us and recognize that we as a society are right now at risk of becoming brutal, and we must resist that tendency. Travel is the opposite of chauvinism. Chauvinism is a curling inward. Travel is an opening outward, and witnessing a global world is one of the best ways to make a global world. The American poet Robert Frost wrote, "Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that wants it down." To which the neighbor in the poem can only say, "Good fences make good neighbors." But history shows us that good fences mostly make real enemies. Donald Trump is talking of this great project to build a wall between the United States and Mexico. Great Britain has been working on the Great Wall of Calais, which is supposed to prevent illegal immigration from the continent. The peace walls in Northern Ireland are now going to be retained in some places. Hungary has sworn to the construction of a massive border fence all around the country, and Israel is well on its way to being a walled nation. And walls are concrete symbols of exclusion. And exclusion often hurts those who are excluding as much as it hurts those who are excluded. And this process entails an overlooking of how the liberal world order benefits all nations. And it shows a callow disregard for the spread of war, for nuclear proliferation. It would make America weak again, and Britain too. It's a trivializing of a delicate peace forged after 2 world wars, which is never a given. Because walls are our burqas. They're symbols of safety that oppress us terribly, and we suffer under them. Those of us who champion internationalism have to acknowledge that it can be confusing and difficult to negotiate, that cheap labor closes jobs in the West, while Western management exploits the world's scattered poor. We have to remember that language gaps lead to misunderstandings and that values are often challenged. But so long as the world is infected with war and starvation and poverty, there will be people striving to escape troubled and impoverished places to apparently less troubled and more prosperous ones. They don't go because emigration is fun. They don't go to exploit places. They don't go without regret. They stay shocked whether they want to or not. Reporting from Tripoli on the end of the Gaddafi regime, I interviewed all of the ministers in his government. And I was struck that everyone I met who wanted rapprochement with the West had lived or studied in the US, the UK, or Western Europe, and that everyone who wanted Libya to remain a rogue terrorist state had not done so. Quarantining otherness, locking people out, breeds an ignorance of us that engenders hatred. It is openness that makes us safe. And it's striking that New York and London, the cities with the largest immigrant populations, are much less afraid of immigration than people in outlying areas. The people who are most afraid of immigrants have never met one. And building walls does not address their problems. It's a weakness masquerading as a fortification. Engaging is the only way forward. Theresa May had it inside out. We must take action as citizens of our countries, yet embrace the larger whole. Believing we cannot be citizens of the world will lose us the world of which we might have been citizens. Thank you. 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 Thank you.